the thumbnail today, and it's my first, and it's not great. And I've already successfully fooled somebody into thinking that this stock photo image person is Kenzo Shibata. So they will be pleasantly disappointed today. Pleasantly disappointed. Let's get started. Welcome, everyone. Greetings. I'm your host, M. Toussaint, and welcome to another episode of This is Revolution podcast. So glad you guys are here with us tonight for what will hopefully be an enlightening and therapeutic session about teaching. Earlier this week, we kicked it off with a discussion about capitalism and emotions with Ashley Frawley. Today, we're going to talk about self care and therapy talk as it relates to teachers with our sometimes why Kenzo Shibata. Kenzo is a teacher in the Chicago school system. For those of you that are subscribers and patrons, thank you for your continued support. That is the fuel in the engine of the TIR machine. If you listeners would also like to access the champagne rooms past and present and be a part of the live audience for the Mau Mau Hour with Pascal Robert, and of course, TIR movie nights. We're having a movie night this Friday. We're still arguing over what the movie's going to be, but it's going to be good. That's what I can tell you. There's only one way. Become a patron for as little as $3 a month or $30 for the year. It can all be yours. Now, on to our topic for today. Can self care and therapy talk replace teachers' wages? To help with this question, let's bring in our guest slash host for today, Kenzo Shibata, not the person in the stock photo in the thumbnail. Hey, Kenzo.
Sorry to disappoint you. I mean, if you look at the current teaching force right now, they look a lot more like that lovely young woman in the thumbnail than they do look like, this 44-year-old washed up punk rocker here. But I'm digressing. And thank you for that wonderful introduction, Toussaint.
You are very welcome. And we love a washed up punk rocker around here.
Yeah, I mean, we're kind of lousy with them on this podcast, right?
So, an embarrassment of riches. Um, so, according to a recent Jacobin article, compared to similarly educated peers in the workforce, teachers earn 76 cents on the dollar. Bubble baths and mindfulness apps can't make up for the systematic denial of life sustaining wages. So, my first question to you is, are you sure self care can't make up for teachers making 76 cents on the dollar?
It all depends on who you ask. I'm if you ask the bosses, for
Hmm.
sure. Like it is, once a month having someone give people 5-minute back rubs with business cards to the massage therapy studio across the hall, across the street from the school,
Wow.
and a certificate saying we appreciate you and we want you to take care of yourself. Um, on Teacher Appreciation Day, the bosses love that. It's low cost, low effort, and it's not doing us anything.
That really happens?
Yeah. I mean, there are days where they'll have professional development days where they'll
Mhm.
have like self-care. We'll have a talking circle at the beginning. And, recently I had a professional development where they had us take a walk around the building. And it was nice, but also like I would have loved to use that 15 minutes to grade student papers so I can walk outside my house after work off the clock for 15 minutes, maybe with my kid, maybe with a friend, maybe with a companion of some sort. Free time. That's what I want. Even more than I want a raise. It's free time. And listeners, viewers, if you don't know, I am a teacher.
That's right. Teacher in Chicago. A very
Hmm.
special place to be a teacher. So they had you
Now
walk
more than
around.
ever.
They had the teachers walk around the building. Just the teachers or the teachers and the students?
Just the teachers. It was actually really funny because the students, many of them were at recess. I teach at a middle school, and the students still have recess there. And so we were outside of the gate, and they were inside of the gate, and they were like, they were watching us the way people watch animals in the zoo. They're like teachers walking. They were like so flabbergasted at watching like a pack of teachers all walking together around the building. And I just try to put myself in their shoes. I'm like, yeah, if I saw that, I'd be like, are they being punished? What's going on here?
Right. A pack of teachers. I like that. That's the name for a group of teachers. It's a
Yes,
pack.
pack. And but yeah, that was just it was also a tease because it was such a nice day. And it's just like, okay, here's 15 minutes, and now we
Oh,
have to sit behind computers and talk about grades and fill out Google forms.
that sucks.
Yeah.
And it kind of would have been nice for students to get that opportunity too. But then also,
Mm,
as you said, for you to have that opportunity to do that on your own time with a loved one, companion, friend. But that is the nature of self care, right? It is
yeah.
self focused.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's all about us.
They don't care about your loved ones. You're supposed to be canceling plans with your loved ones to do more work and then to do self care.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean when that's also the insulting thing is like when we have like one of those full day professional development days, I have to like sign up my kid then for all day childcare with the park district, which is pretty affordable. I like the program, but it's still money out of my pocket. It's money I'm paying to work. It's money that I make a paycheck from one city agency, and then I give
Mhm.
another city agency that while giving my labor to the first one still that day, not really reaping any. So basically, I take a pay cut for the day. And
Damn.
so when they build in things like self-care into that daily schedule, it's just so insulting because I would much rather just be with my child right now.
Right. Oh, I'm sure your child would rather be with you too.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, for sure. I mean, it's the park district is nice and all, but like
mhm,
just being the kids are just institutionalized for too long. One of the things that Rahm Emanuel did when he was mayor of Chicago, and because
mhm,
it's all politics, he lengthened our school day from a 6.25 hour day to a 7 hour day. And he did it through propaganda and through inflated numbers. He kept throwing out this number that kids in Houston went to school an extra 4 years out of their lifetime because they had a longer school day. And the reason why our school day was shorter than the average one was there was
mhm.
an agreement made between the Board of Education and the teachers union one year. The Board of Ed said, well, we can't afford to pay you anything extra. And we want to make sure that you're getting paid for the time you're there. So what we'll do is we'll make the teacher's lunch at the end of the day, but then you get to leave early. Like, it's an hour long lunch, but then you get to leave an hour early. So the kids lost recess in that process for the most part. But
Whoa.
teachers were still working the same amount of hours per day without a lunch, essentially. And then Rahm Emanuel said, oh, well, this means that, the kids are losing an hour a day. Well, that's not true. Actual time in front of a teacher did not change at all. In fact, Chicago on the overall did a little bit better than other districts when it came to instructional hours. And
Mhm.
he campaigned on forcing these teachers to work a longer day, and he forced a 7-hour school day on us. And it's been bad for kids. It's been bad for parents. It hasn't just been bad for teachers and school workers. I know with my kid, he's just exhausted at the end of the day. Uh,
Mhm.
if a kid is involved in any after school activities, they're leaving home in the dark. It's not safe.
Mhm.
It's just, it completely changed the culture in CPS. And it was all for him to put a bullet point on his reelection literature saying he lengthened the school day in Chicago and didn't have to pay for it.
Is that why the teachers union in Chicago is so strong? Because you guys had a Disney villain to go up
I
against.
will tell you this, it took a lot of organizing before Rom was even mayor, but when Rom, the first thing he did was he canceled a 4% raise. We had a clause in our contract that said that if there's a financial emergency, the school district can refuse to pay the last year of our contractual raises, which is a 4% raise that year. And Rahm Emanuel, through what do they call it, creative accounting, was able to show this huge shortfall in the district. So they said, okay, we're canceling the raises. And the money was found later, by the way. But in the
Mhm.
meantime, that got teachers so energized to be involved with the union and show up to union meetings, and for union reps to show up to our House of Delegate meetings, because, at this point, he just threw down the gauntlet and just said, this money that everyone was relying on, for some teachers who were about to retire, and that was their last year before they retire, they were counting on that raise to fund them, their lives for their in perpetuity, essentially.
Mhm.
And for other teachers, we were expecting that money. We had kids or we didn't have kids, but we had rent goes up, groceries go up, the cost of living goes up,
Mhm.
and we got screwed. And that got teachers really energized. And then the lengthening of the school day, that got a lot of parents on the board with the union and
Mhm.
community orgs, because now all of a sudden the kids don't have ties necessarily to their neighborhoods. They're stuck in school doing more test prep for the most part, because
Mhm.
after school activities weren't really added, enrichment programs weren't added, art and music was still bereft of most schools. And
Mhm.
so the kids were doing an hour or more of test prep. And so that really got a lot of support behind us in our first strike in 2012.
Jeez. More test prep. It's hard for anyone to get behind that, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I
Hmm.
remember hated taking tests as a kid. Did you taking tests, Toussaint?
I remember the first time I took a standardized test.
Mhm.
I was so wound up and anxious about it. You know how you teachers, you people,
Uh-huh.
you have all the tests in your hand and you give it to the first kid in a row, and then they hand all the tests back, and then every kid gets one.
Mhm.
I was so anxious I wrote my name on every test. And then I had to erase it. It was a whole thing, and I was just like, this test taking is not for me. It's not a healthy experience for kids. As it turns
No.
out, I'm very good at taking those tests,
Mhm.
except the SAT. I sucked at that one, but it's never pleasant. And you teachers are teaching to the test quite a bit, and that's not fun.
Yeah, and it's gonna get worse. Uh, Telling you, one thing they're really touting in the district, and I don't know if this is gonna change with the change of the school board, and the change in the leadership in CPS. That's gonna be huge, but they really want teachers to all to be teaching the exact same thing, like a scripted curriculum. So the talking point for that is if an administrator walks into one fourth grade classroom, they should be able to walk into one and then walk into the one across the hall, and they should almost be able to hear the rest of the sentence the last teacher said, like we're robots. And
Creepy.
so they're actually going to be the district said that they're going to be observing classrooms to make sure that we are streamlining our curriculum, with that being the gold standard. And it's just going to be miserable for teachers, for kids, for absolutely everyone. It's going to be, a lot of the joy has already been sucked out of the classroom in the past 10, 15, 20 years. But then at that
Mhm.
point, no one's going to want to be there.
I can't imagine. I mean, the model that they're considering or that they want is essentially McDonald's,
Yeah.
which
And
sucks. You should be able to walk into any McDonald's and have the same experience. Same fries, same burger, same.
yeah, I was actually just watching Chef's or Hell's Kitchen, and he was explaining, Gordon Ramsay, how his thing, his specialty is the fact that he could train people to, doing having the exact same standards he has. And how does he do it? By berating them, by humiliating them, by like traumatizing them. And that's exactly what the school district is doing to us.
Right.
Except they can use PMC speak because there's so many layers between the assholes at the top and then the people actually implementing the policies. Speaking of which, Paul Vallis, who narrowly lost our mayorship in Chicago,
Mhm.
was one of the big architects of this in New Orleans, in Philadelphia, in Chicago, of just privatizing the schools. And one of his big mantra is that he wants to deprofessionalize teaching.
Mhm.
He thinks the standard should be Teach for America, where you take, kids from Ivy League schools, you put them in a classroom for 2 or 3 years, and while they're young and full of energy, they'll just work around the clock, burn them out, and then send them off into the private sector, and then have a brand new cohort every 2, 3 years. And that's, he's never been shy about nakedly putting it that way. But then, like, when you have the people typically who run for office, they have his policies in mind, but they'll have a nicer way of putting it. Obama's way of saying was, well, we need to have tougher standards and not everyone should be a teacher, and we need to find ways to take care of the people who, find out that they can't be teachers. And he never followed through with that. It was, yeah, we'll find
What
ways
does
to
that
make it easier
even
to fire
mean?
teachers, but then, like, there aren't any, free education for people they deem to be bad teachers to go into other fields. They're just screwed.
That's such a weird statement. Yeah,
Yeah.
so there's no plan, there's no pipeline for bad teachers. It's just like go wreak your havoc on other sectors.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a plan to get them in, but not a plan to get them out.
Mhm.
It sounds like the military. It sounds like, that kind of forced enlistment.
Mhm.
Send the Ivy League kids in for 2 3 years, and then that's the service to your country. The rest of your life is yours. Go to McKinsey.
Yeah, exactly. And like his staff in New Orleans, I remember he spoke at Northwestern University. I was there for grad school and I decided just to be there because I'm like, when will I ever get to be a fly on the wall in an event like this? And all of his staff that he had there, they were all TFA alum who 2 3 years, they went to an Ivy League school, two years, maybe 3 years in an urban classroom, and then now they are like telling other teachers what to do. And they have very nice business suits, and the ones that he had with him were probably like higher ups on his staff too. But that was his exactly. It was very militaristic. It's like that was where
Mhm.
he recruited from.
Jeez. What's TFA, by the way?
TFA is Teach for America. It's a
Mhm.
program that it started in 1990, and the idea of it was at that point in America there was a teaching shortage. And by the way, the teaching shortage, that phrase is used to mean many different things. It's usually just a euphemism at that point. At that time, I think there actually was a teaching shortage. And
Mhm.
so the idea was, well, we have these very smart people from these Ivy League schools who are experts in their content area. So, like, if someone majored in English at Yale, put them in a 6 week training program so they understand how a classroom works and have them teach. And then in the same time, they can go to grad school and get their teaching certificate if they so wish. And
Mhm.
they'll have that grad school paid for by the organization. And it ran for a long time. And then, it got to the point though where the teaching shortage didn't really exist. And what we were
Mhm.
seeing in places like Chicago were like these huge swaths of schools that had primarily black teachers getting either closed down where the entire staff is just fired, or a program called turnaround where they would fire every single, if the test scores drop under a certain threshold, they'd fire every teacher, every adult in the building, really. So even like custodians, cafeteria workers get fired and they'd be replaced by other people. So that became sort of a back channel so TFA people can still find jobs. So there were certain turnaround schools in Chicago that only hired Teach for America alums. So they would fire, 15, 20, 25-year veteran teachers, replace them with these TFA recruits. And so they would be very malleable. None of them would be tenured. None of them would have roots in the city, or maybe even intending to stay in the city. And so it created this opening. And now there is a teacher shortage. But what that is a euphemism for is just the fact that teachers are just quitting. And so
Yeah.
there's a surplus actually of people with teaching certificates and credentials right now, but the actual number of people looking for teaching jobs is low compared to the number of teaching jobs. So that's the only reason why there's a shortage. And this, I think that Teach for America cycle and the
Mhm.
closing of schools and everything like that, that really contributed to the fact of so many people leaving the profession and just saying, nope, not coming back.
Wow. So who are the baddies? Who's imposing? Who's doing these things to you? Who's pushing you around at work? Who's imposing this self-care talk onto teachers? And do you feel there's a certain amount of blame that's implied with this language?
Um, well, the problem with the language of self care is so individualistic. And I
Mhm.
do feel like it is a means of impacting our ability to organize self care. And, we all have different needs when it comes to self care.
Mhm.
And you can't make everyone happy that way. And it creates more divisions, I believe. And what
Hmm.
we really need, well, we need overall is things like free mental health care, free health care for everybody. But we need to have rich teachers union contracts, especially that just afford us the ability to go to therapy without copays and, take care of our self-care needs confidentially, like, with clinicians that we pay for outside of the school building, give us more time off for mental health care, allow us mental health days so we don't have to like snicker about it and like honestly put that into our contract language. Some days you wake up and you just can't do it, and we have such a
Mhm.
trying job, and we deal with trauma and trauma retriggering more than a lot of other professions. Like, give us the ability to do self-care, but just let us do it privately. Don't force it upon us. Don't make it these blanket programs where you know we either take the benefit or we don't, and then they could say, well, no one ever takes the benefits then when we offer them, and then just whittle away at other things. Give us the material conditions to take care of ourselves.
But you can go to your own private nail technician and get a very nice pedicure and manicure. I mean, whether or not she's going to be confidential, who's she going to tell? Is really the question. That's the real question.
Well, if you know Vietnamese, you'll know exactly who she's telling.
Okay. Well, yes. But who's that person going to tell? There's your confidentiality.
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
I think you make a very good distinction between just random self care or the kind of self care everyone can get and confidential self care.
And a lot of this too, I think there's a lot of overlap with the white fragility kind of um what do you even call that? Just blob that's overtaken a
Mm-hmm.
lot of the professional managerial class because and it's all linked together. It's therapy speak that links racial justice with ignoring our material conditions. Really,
Mm-hmm.
it's a perfect win for the bosses because the white fragility speak when they have these workshops. It is really set up like therapy. And the idea is that we're supposed to kind of exercise our demons in that space, and we have to call it space. We can't call it a place. And it's a way to individualize all of our problems, but also to get us. I guess the self care part is to get us to individualize our problems, and the white fragility part is to get us to point fingers at everyone else. And
Mm,
meanwhile, let solidarity be damned.
wow. It's amazing how they come up with these schemes. I mean,
Hmm.
you wouldn't think self care talk could lead to that.
Hmm.
You wouldn't think just a sprinkle of white fragility could lead to all of this. Just a touch, a smidge.
Well, I mean, a lot of it too, it's about that privacy piece too, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Like, maybe you don't want to sit in a circle and talk about ways that you've been racially traumatized with coworkers.
Mm-hmm.
And, chances are you don't. Um, I never did. I never really wanted to sit in those circles and, you know, for any reason. Like I don't want to have to put things that I've dealt with on display. And, I think it does, we are coworkers at the end of the day. And
Mm-hmm.
we need to be able to organize together to fight for each other and have each other's backs. And, that's really it. And then, I'll go to political theory discussions on my own. I'll go to my own therapist. I'll
Mm-hmm.
hang out with my own friends and have beers with them. Like I don't need a self-care routine just like the person that I already spend 10 hours a day with practically.
That's true. That's another like homogenizing McDonald's kind of monoculture
Mm,
thing. Yeah. Oh, that's horrible. I'm so sorry.
it's okay.
Well, as a labor economist study shows, while the non-teacher college graduates saw their weekly wages rise by $445 and $221 between 1996 and 2021. Public school teachers' inflated adjusted wages increased only by $29 during that time period. Talk to us about the teacher pay penalty.
What's the wonderful thing about that is the 96 to the present is the era of the teacher bashing, the era of
Hmm.
teachers are just in it for the money. And
Right.
it's just like it's one of those, it's like the big lie theory where like you just say the most outlandish ridiculous thing and people have to believe it. And the idea
Hmm.
that teachers are just in it for the money is just so laughable when we're looking at $29 versus $445. you know
Absolutely.
a $29 increase in wages over this period, it's so paltry and so insulting. And, right now, I mean, I think one of the things in Chicago I can speak to that really speaks to how miserable the professional has gotten.
Hmm.
It's one of the better paying jobs if you've been in here in this system for a while and have a master's degree. Like I feel like I get paid pretty well with the number of years of experience I have in my master's, but I'm
Okay.
also leaving, the profession because
Whoa, whoa,
it
whoa,
is
whoa,
that
whoa, whoa.
miserable.
Slow down
Yeah.
there, tough guy. You're leaving.
Yeah, I'm going to grad school next year, and I am going to school to get my master's in social work. I'm going to be a therapist.
Oh my
And
gosh. You're going to get some real self care.
yes, and other care and,
Yeah.
make some money that I can retire on one day, possibly.
Right, right.
But yeah, that it's overall though, I think teachers are paid pretty well here, but they're still leaving and getting taking pay cuts because it's
Hmm.
so miserable. And, that's even more laughable if you think about the fact that just by staying in the profession, we're taking a pay cut.
Right.
Looking at these numbers, but Chicago is kind of an anomaly. Like in other places, teachers are paid way under what is a thriving wage wherever they happen to live. We happen to be in a city that, we negotiated some pretty strong contracts. I do feel like we're overworked, but we are compensated fairly well. But if you go, especially to rural areas, even some suburban areas, teachers are not doing well at all. And there are other prospects for them to go into at this point.
Mhm.
And you see a lot of teachers going into sales, you know, education
Wow.
sales, educational technology, trying to do something that's somewhat connected to education. But the funny thing about that is all of these organizations that they end up working for are the ones that are undermining our profession. Like education tech companies
Oh.
are all proposing ways to replace us without actually using the word replace us. Online education is, showing to be a very big enemy of ours at this point. And so, I mean, it's as if capitalism sucks.
Yeah. I've never heard that before. So it's not like these teachers are going into these professions and it's like salt. They're
Mm,
spreading union messages and they just really don't have that kind of power when they go into these other educational related fields.
no, it really is that's the neoliberal education world they have to cross
Mhm.
into. And some some go into the policy side of it, which is extreme neoliberalism usually, because there isn't a lot of money being thrown around to get like good left progressive pro education policy passed, but there's tons of money to go around through the nonprofit industrial complex if you want to open a nonprofit that promotes charter schools or promotes Teach for America type programs or things like that. Because the billionaires, they want to bust our unions. Like Brandon Johnson, former or CTU member, teacher, becoming mayor of Chicago is the biggest nightmare of these privatizers. In fact, that's why they were throwing money hand over fist over their guy, because that's the last thing they want to see is any kind of empowerment of the people delivering the service. So it's going to be really interesting to watch how things go over the next months and years in this city.
Very interesting. So, when you go out for dinner with your college educated friends
Hmm.
who are not teachers, they are not do they pay for you? Do they not expect you to tip? Or like what is it? What's the breakdown? How does it
Well,
work in your social group, the teacher penalty pay?
the thing about my particular social group is even the lawyers are like labor lawyers, civil rights lawyers. So I don't have like anyone who can really pay the bill. We were
Mhm.
always Venmoing each other cash, which the neoliberals win again because we do that. But I do get a lot of sympathy from my friends. And I think at this point, 44, I've curated the people out of my life who would be annoying to have dinner with enough
Right.
where like we all are kind of on the same page and they mostly have questions about
Mhm.
what's going on. But I do remember like, when you're younger and you have kind of more rando friends, hearing a lot of like, oh, your unions are doing this, that, and the other thing, usually like they
Yeah.
always have this caricature of the teacher making a ton of money, but not teaching the kids and like just loving it. And I'm like, first of all, a teacher that doesn't like kids is miserable. That is not a
True.
job they want to be in.
Very
Their
true.
life sucks, and they want to die. And they're certainly not in it for the money when they could leave the profession and do something else. So it just
Mm.
there's so many contradictions in that stereotype of the greedy union teacher. Um, it's hilarious and laughable, but like anyone who would believe that is not. I'm not really breaking bread with.
Good answer. I'm glad you're not. Good job. Way to cull and cultivate.
That's like the
So
best
it's
of adulthood, I think.
I think
Is
so
like
too.
I don't have to be around people I don't like, except for work
Yeah. Except for work. That's the only time
and
where
public
you spend
transportation.
at least 8 hours. Well, what is that like being in a union then? Because there must be people you don't like there too, but you
Oh,
do
for
have a
sure.
common cause.
For sure. I mean, there are people with personalities I don't like. That's the smallest end of it. But then there's serious like right wing people in my union as well. Like
Wow.
there's a significant number of people who are literally married to cops who are active in the union, and some of them actually become building reps. Some of them actually are pretty good building reps as far as being able to organize their staff, keeping them informed, and being good unionists.
Mm-hmm.
However, when it comes to like the bigger picture issues, when we discuss them, they are awful. They're pretty terrible people. They don't when we were supporting Black Lives Matter as the union, they were very vocal opponents of that. They often don't want us to get involved in politics in the city because we always endorse left wing candidates. And, some of them outright, are anti choice, anti trans. Um, so, yeah, it is a battle, and it is one of those situations where democracy is messy, but it's good because we still have the power of people like that, as cynical as it sounds, in our numbers, but they don't necessarily have the numbers to eliminate a vote to support BLM, for example. Or if
Mm-hmm.
we buy a float in the Pride Parade, they might oppose that, but they don't have the numbers to actually get us to not do that. So and that's important, I think, because that has built a lot of bridges with our students, seeing their teachers at Pride, also members who are in the LGBT community,
Mm-hmm.
who felt like they didn't have a place in their union for a long time. These things are important, and we discuss them and we debate them and vote on all of them. One of the things that's really interesting to watch is around a strike is typically even some of our most right-wing members will become, I don't want to use the word radicalized, but like they really get solidarity in that moment. And,
Mm-hmm.
they'll keep their mouths shut when the press comes up to them and say, is there anything you don't like about CTU? And, they might say that at the bar, but they won't say it in front of ABC News.
Mm, yeah.
Um, so it is messy and complicated, but it's like, it's the reason why cancel culture kind of sucks, is that we do have to work with people we hate sometimes, or people
Mm-hmm.
we dislike, to get things done. And yeah, I mean, I'm not going to necessarily share a beer with every single member of my union, but I'm glad they're paying dues, and I'm glad they show up to events when they do, and I'm glad they're talking to people in their buildings about working conditions.
That sounds fantastic. I always imagine that there's a clarity, a cleanliness about being in a union, because we know what we're here for and we know what the main thing is. So many times you deal with people and it's like they're not keeping the main thing the main thing. But
Hmm.
it feels like in dealing with union people, you would be dealing with people who get that. The main thing is the main thing.
Yeah. And it's a lot of it, I think, is structure is good. We have
Mhm.
a structure where every building has a certain amount of reps depending on how many members there are in the building, and they all go to a monthly meeting to
Mhm.
vote and debate issues. And we have democratic elections in we everyone votes in the school buildings, and it's a fairly low bar for running as well. If you're it's having been involved in city and state politics too, running for a union election, as dirty as it can be, it is a lot closer representation to democracy than
Mhm.
regular electoral politics. Like, any teacher can run if they have the ability to pull a group of people together and get the word out and get petitions signed and all that good stuff. So it's nice because it doesn't lead everything up to a big fight every single time, because we do have those structures in place. And like, it makes things clean in the school buildings as well. Like,
Mhm.
if I have, let's say, 40 kids in the class and the contract says I should only have 30, I can go to my boss and then say, look, here's a form that I sent to the union. Someone's going to come in here and talk to you about the extra 10 kids. And it doesn't have to be personal then. And it doesn't
Mhm.
have to be about personalities. And in
Yeah.
some cases, if you have a respectable principal, they'll be on board with helping you get those extra 10 kids out of that classroom and into a new classroom and get a new teacher hired, because that only helps them as well. A
Right.
well functioning union means well functioning schools. And that just makes the boss's jobs easier. The problem, though, is the principals act as more middle management with the board of education having a foot on their necks at all times too. So we do have this class of principals who are just trying to work their way up the system, and they'll throw teachers under the bus,
Mm.
no problem. So having a union that in the building that can train the principal on how to act is also just so crucial.
Wow. I never thought about training. Yeah, it would have to. That just sounds fantastic. This being in a union thing. Why are people so down on it?
Well, I think that for the most part, people aren't. Like,
Yeah.
most people, if asked, would you rather have a union in your workplace than not, will say yes. The
Hmm.
problem is once you start that process, the bosses, in many cases, probably most cases, they'll pay more money on union avoidance than they will on what would cost they'd have to pay in raises and in better working conditions for their workers through a union contract. It's an ideological difference, and it's also they look at it as an investment, because if you don't have a union contract, then that means the boss always sets the terms of working conditions and wages without any pushback. So as soon as someone is identified as a union leader, the bosses will come down hard on them, and usually it's middle managers. They have do this so the top bosses can keep their hands clean, and people will get fired for things that are not their fault. um, they will get pressured into not or telling on their coworkers who are part of the union.
Hmm.
It's a really vicious campaign, and if you're working in a corporate culture, once a union gets kind of feasible in a workplace, that's when the higher ups will like send out the union busting team, like professional people who get hired to
Yeah.
do this shit. Sadly, a lot of these people are former union staffers who they know the tricks of the trade, and they've become disillusioned, and they'll come in and they'll bust the union. And I mean, the thing is, it's always easier to destroy something than it is to build something. So that's just
Mhm.
easy money right there. So of course they're always going to find people who can do that.
Have you known any that have crossed over to the other side?
There's well, yeah, okay. There was a guy that he was working his way up pretty high in SEIU locally here, and he got busted for being an abusive boss, like harassing and I think even up to assaulting,
Wow.
allegedly, because I can't I don't know for sure,
Sure. Yeah.
staffers. And then he became a realtor and was actually putting on seminars for realtors trying to fight rent control. And so like it was someone thing where it's like, if he was always a scumbag, his heart wasn't really into social justice. It was really
Hmm.
just about, I found this niche, and so
Yeah.
he's just going to find his way somewhere else. But yeah, I've seen it before. Those are
Gross.
people that could be canceled, I think.
Yes. Let's cancel those. Put them all in a boat. I'm still concerned about the 10 kids with no teacher.
Hmm.
Where did they go?
Well, the idea is that they should hire on more teachers so we can have fewer kids in front of us and
Yeah.
have deeper, richer relationships with the families we serve. But that's the last thing the board wants to give us.
Well, I'll tell you, I guess, a bit of a joke. My experience at the Fashion Institute of Technology,
Mm,
it's notorious for having too many students in the beginning because the
mm,
curriculum is very, very difficult. So in the beginning, everyone's like, "Yeah, I got into the school. I want to be a designer. I want to do this." We compare it to pejoratively public school quite a bit.
mhm,
There's like kids on the radiators, kids on the windowsill.
uh-huh.
All the seats are taken. There's standing room also, and it's just like in the following weeks, those kids all drop out, but they'll
Mm.
tolerate this massive class in the very beginning. So I'm just like, where did those 10 kids go?
That
Yeah.
is so like the Chicago public schools for sure.
Is it really? That's
Yeah, they call it
horrible.
it's called leveling, and they don't do this it's not this bad anymore, but when I first started teaching in the early 2000s, there was was it the 20th day rule. So they would stuff 40, 50 kids in your classroom, and you would have to take daily attendance, and they would send it to the Board of Education. And then the Board of Education would look at numbers and decide 3 weeks into the school, actually, no, almost a month because it's school days, a month
Mhm.
into the school year, whether they should send more teachers to certain schools. So you would have kids
Wow.
like on the radiators, in the windowsills, all over. And like you would just have to promise them, like, it's not going to be this bad. And in that time, some kids do leave. Some parents are like, no, and they pull their kid out and they take him to another school, a charter school
Mhm.
maybe. But then, also in the meantime, these they're just too many kids in the classroom. And then they'll send the numbers to the board, and the board will they call them class reduction positions, and they'll send these teachers to the schools to work. And then they'll level off your classrooms to 28 kids per room.
Mhm.
And it was just so funny because the school year is only 10 months long. 10% of that is like in it what would be considered a temporary classroom until they leveled off the rooms.
Jesus, a temporary classroom. That's such a funny little concept. Just put a nice
Mhm.
little name on it. Unbelievable. This is like the richest country in the world.
Yeah.
Kids on radiators. Good job.
Richest country in the world, a what, every mayor we've ever had calls a world-class city. Mayor Daley wanted the Olympics to be here. We had NATO here, but kids on radiators.
Kids on radiators. Unreal. Well, let me ask another question about I'm kind of fascinated by this teacher pay penalty thing.
Mm.
So, how much of the teacher pay penalty and all of the penalties um, for being a teacher have to do with the majority of teachers being women? And how do
Oh,
you experience this as a male teacher?
for sure. That's historically, the idea was that a woman, you know, was a teacher until she got married. And
Mhm.
so that was the first time they were able to make the excuse for terrible wages and working conditions where they're like, it's not a permanent job anyway. It's like, what, well, that's what the anti raising the minimum wage people are saying now about fast food jobs.
Mm.
And, that's what they were saying about teachers. Like this was a temporary job for young women. So they, they shouldn't get paid very well. And over time, like, these, the getting paid less, the assumption that, we're all in it just for the kids and for the service, which we are, but we also still have to eat. And we also have our own kids that we're there for,
That's right.
and families and selves. So that has definitely been part of it. Nurses and teachers, predominantly female
Mhm.
profession, have always been treated so poorly. And in Chicago, it was one of the few positions for people of color too. Professional
Mhm.
positions where people would actually get, people of color would actually get hired. And so, the teaching profession was very much devalued, I think, for these reasons. And as a man, it's hmm. I never really thought of it that way because I always just kind of think of it as, I am in a predominantly female profession, and I've
Mhm.
always, looked at it as like, um, you know, saw those kind of systemic issues for that reason, and I've always
Mhm.
felt in solidarity for that reason. But one thing though that Chicago's different because we're all under one contract. But then when you go to some districts where high school teachers and elementary school teachers are on different contracts, high school teachers tend to make more, and they also tend to be more male. And
Mm.
we can look at that kind of data too. So these are definitely some long-standing inequities for that reason.
Very interesting. I mean, I feel like that also has to do with the demonization of the unions, the fact that,
Mm.
you know, it's also head up by women, or at
Yeah,
least one woman. Do you
yeah, and
think
if you
that
look,
matters? Like it
oh
would be
yeah,
more
and
successful if a man was the leader of the teachers union?
I don't. I think because the profession itself is female coded, I
Mhm.
don't know how much that matters. Although traditionally, the predominantly female teachers unions had been presided over by men.
Mhm.
And actually one of the first real radical teachers, Robert, or leaders of the CTU, Robert Healy, was a white man, but um he was a part of a radical, what at the time was considered a radical faction of the union, where their political organization within the union, they only allowed one white member for every one black member in there. So it was the first time there was a leadership group that was actually diverse and actually accepted black members. And he did a lot for diversifying the education, the profession, actually desegregating the school force, because for a while there, it was all black teachers were teaching at black schools, all white teachers were at white schools, and there was a consent decree for a while there where teachers were sent to different buildings. So you had kids having teachers that for the first time didn't look like them. Um,
Mhm.
so it was, yeah, I mean, it's been kind of all over the place, I think, politically, when we look at, um, how these leaders viewed diversity. Um, but there is also, like, I should mention, there's like a divide between the building trades and the teachers unions and the nurses union.
Mhm.
They're the more male dominated, more, at least around here, more right wing, and kind of almost an um anti teachers union sentiment. Now that said, there have been a lot of inroads made in recent years. But there had been a huge divide there. And of course, I guess the elephant in the room then is the Fraternal Order of Police, um,
Mhm.
who absolutely hate us.
Yes.
And a lot of ways, our last mayoral election was a proxy war between the Chicago Teachers Union and the Fraternal Order of Police, with Vallis being endorsed by the FOP and Brandon being a member of the CTU.
Oh, wow. I'm glad the good guys won.
Yeah, that would have that would have been one of the few things to drive me out of Chicago. It would have been a Vallis win, possibly.
Really? You love Chicago.
I absolutely love Chicago, but I couldn't teach here at all. I mean, I couldn't do any kind of public service in the city here, because it would be on a death spiral at that point. Just
Mhm.
every bad aspect of the city would be elevated by that person. So I would at least consider it, but I'm actually hopeful now.
Wow. That's I don't know if we get to hear people say that on the show. I'm actually hopeful now. Thank you for not being a black pillar doomer, which is also fine.
Well, I've had
It
10
has its
days to be
place.
helpful.
Yeah. Well, okay. Let me throw this at you.
Mhm.
Many teachers don't have any time to relax because of adequate compensation, because inadequate compensation forces them to take on other jobs. But even when there's bubble baths and mindfulness apps that can't make up for systematic denial of life sustaining wages. For too many educators, real self care has meant finding a different line of work. What are some of the other solutions that you see for this situation? I see you found a solution for yourself in
Mhm.
leaving this line of work.
Well, my solution for the past 15 years was just being really involved in the union. And, when we've seen results in Chicago, you're involved in the union, you can elevate working conditions on a building level. Like, I remember my first grievance I filed as a union rep led to $100,000 worth of building repairs over the ceiling of my classroom, because I had a
Oh,
leak in the classroom, and I had to go through a lot of different routes, and eventually filed a complaint through the Department of Labor, which forced the hand of the board to get these repairs fixed. And it's sustained me a lot. The solidarity, the feel of solidarity, then knowing that we were all in it together, and that we're fighting for a better world. That was, I think that did a lot more than a bubble bath would have. Just
mhm,
having that union, and like I'm saying, I'm hopeful now. I'm not saying that the world of or the world of education is over, and that I'm leaving a sinking ship. I'm leaving a ship that's people are trying to repair, and people are working really hard at getting the ship afloat again. But I'm just damn tired. That's why I'm leaving now. It's a very, and that's what self care is. It's a very individualistic thing. And right now I'm taking a very individualistic road after 15 years of collectivism. And not to say that collectivism didn't work; it very much worked. I'm just ready
Mhm.
to kind of pass the baton on to other leaders and be ready for my next chapter. And I think that's one of the things that people can look at and they shouldn't be ashamed of, because at one point in your life, you declared you wanted to be a teacher and now you're burnt out doesn't mean you failed. In the time you did it, you were able to make a difference in people's lives. You were able to actualize something in yourself, and maybe it's time to move on. And there should be no guilt in that.
That's such a good answer. You are such a nice man.
Thank you.
You're, you're gonna make a good therapist.
Appreciate that.
That's also, is that also a female coded career?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's hard to say with that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's definitely a PMC coded career, but I don't know about gender.
that's true. That's true. I still see you being asked to pick up the, the water containers and replace it at the water cooler. I feel like that's still going to be asked of you.
And I like to lift weights. I like to show off a little bit. I'm always willing to do that. As long as my back still works, I will lift up the water cooler.
That's awesome. We have a super chat here. I'm going to read it. Let's see. This is from JB. JB says, as a former teacher and third, what is that, generation? Who
Yeah.
was third generation who was in the trenches for 15 years. I'm glad you're getting out, Kenzo. I'm sure you'll miss it as I do, but good to get out. You didn't fail anything or anybody. Oh,
Oh, that was very nice, JB.
that's very nice. JB talks about being a teacher all the time. I feel like it's once a teacher, always a teacher.
Yeah, for sure. Like you wear those scars.
Like once a stripper, always a stripper. That's what they say. You'll never dance the same again.
And you were just mentioning second jobs. I mean, there are some people that are wearing both those badges.
That's true. It's very true.
And the
We
New
have
York Post is
another.
looking for them.
Mm.
Fuckers.
We have another super chat from Sean McCallum. The FOP, the Sus Scrofia Syndicate. Scrofa Syndicate.
Scrofa. I
What's
know
Scrofa?
Bofa, but I don't know Scrofa.
Mm-hmm. Maybe he made it up. I don't know. So we have another comment here. My first year doing it, and it's to the point where I'm considering going to law school as a less stressful option.
That is a pretty common thing.
Is it?
There is a pipeline there because I think a lot of it is when people become teachers, they're usually majoring in something that leads to a law career, like English or history or philosophy, and
Mhm.
then you can just go on to law school from there. Also, like it's teachers like to argue.
Do they?
Hmm. Oh
I
yeah, you
didn't
should come to one of our
realize
union
that.
meetings. I mean, I kept saying that maybe I gave a little bit of a Pollyanna view of the union, but when we fight, and we fight each other. It can get real ugly.
Okay. Good to know. Good to know. So your union, is it like, I don't know, is it different from other unions? Is it more like the nurses union and less like a union that would be started for Amazon or like the UPS
Yeah.
union?
We're definitely one of the things that makes us unique is that we are a public sector union, which means we follow a
There
different
you
set of
go.
laws than a private sector
Hmm.
employer would. So yeah, we are very different from Amazon. One of the things though that does make us very different is like the long storied history of teachers unions in in America. So like there's that institutional knowledge there, and that does make it a difficult task in other sectors to get people to organize, is that they just don't see
Mhm.
themselves as being um, union members, or like, the idea like Amazon is like an easy job to get. And
Mhm.
so people, I think they kind of build that into them, like, well, I'm sacrificing good working conditions because I really, really needed a job. And what we need to remind people is that you also are a human being, and no matter what your job is, you deserve to have bathroom breaks and living wages and time off.
And not be told to take a bubble bath. Take a bubble bath because you want to, not because you're told to.
Give me more than a $29 raise. First of all,
Yeah.
$29, that's not going to get me much at Bed Bath and Beyond.
This is true.
So
$29
yeah, if you even
to
want me to self-care, you're gonna have to give me a better raise than that.
That's absolutely true. $29 to 445
Mm-hmm.
for other college educated professions. That's a
445.
lot.
That's a couple nice spa days.
That is buys a lot of Jordans. A lot of Jordans, a lot of boxes of cereal, a lot of
Mm.
pedicures. Do you take bubble baths at all?
I don't, but I do go to a Korean spa every once in a while. So I do
Do
indulge
you
in
get
that
the body
world.
scrub?
I don't.
Why not? It is like the best thing in the world, dude. You got to
I
try
might
it.
next time because I'm always eyeballing. I'm like, that looks interesting, but I don't know. It's such an alien concept, but I might do it.
It's amazing. They find dirt on you that you didn't even know you had,
That's kind of
and
scary.
you leave there feeling a little bit raw but accomplished.
Okay.
Yeah, it's
That's how I feel
very
like at the end of the school day someday teaching sixth graders. Raw but accomplished.
Korean body scrub will be better than that, I promise.
I bet.
All right, we are actually at the end of the show. Are there any last words you'd like to say? We have this chat member Kilgore Kraut who said he very much identifies with your story. Anything you'd like to say to him too?
What was that?
Um, the chat member who said they were in it for about a year, were thinking about law school.
Mhm.
He says he identifies with you and your story.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, and, do what you gotta do. I hate that idea that, like, we have to keep people in the profession, so we have to tell them just to, like, keep their chin up, and, like, if you're being ground down to nothing, you're being ground down to nothing, and, the profession's gonna be there. You can always quit, keep your credential active, and then in a few years, if you change your mind, go back to teaching. But I know I had those periods in my life where I'm like, well, that's what I do. I don't really feel like teaching this year, but I'm going to go back. And for the most part, then I eventually kind of fake it till I make it, and then I got my head in the game again. But after this year, and after teaching through the pandemic, I'm just like, you know what? It's been real.
Yeah, pandemic really sealed the deal for a lot of people.
Hmm.
I do have one last question. This is a personal question.
Uh-huh.
What is the best gift for a teacher? Because apparently you guys have like drawers full of mugs. Like,
Drawers full of mugs, drawers full of Starbucks gift certificates, which are fine, but like we do get so many of those from parents.
hmm,
Um, but a good gift for a teacher would be, I mean,
a spa.
if you know them well and they like spa days and things like that, then yeah, I would go for that. Taking them out to dinner and just talking to them. I mean, that would be something, that would be the
Wow.
best gift for me. Would just someone just take me out to dinner, paying the bill, hanging out, talking about life, and just I'm really more into experiences than things. So that would be what
Okay.
I'd ask for.
That's really nice. You want to talk to parents. That's like not even real. That's fantastic. Now we know what to get Kenzo. And we know what Kenzo's going to get when he goes to the Korean spa.
Oh yeah, I will. I will do that next time.
Let me know how it goes. I think you're going to love it. All right. So with that, we're going to wrap it up. And I will say, you can join me. We are out.